So, Jonathan, you were the production designer on Genius, a miniseries that recounts the life of Albert Einstein through several decades of his life. Uh, I guess no other way to ask this, how did you pull that off? I mean, all these different locations and time periods.
Well, it was the biggest challenge was the fact that we were doing it all in one country and mostly in one city, which was Prague, although we did use other cities in the Czech Republic. And so we began obviously with the scripts, looking at we had a few scripts at the beginning that gave us a good start, but we knew the story was going to run for many decades. And so we had to find a language really for the show that would allow us to chart that journey through not only time, but the different countries that he lived in. So we began with his life when he was quite young in Germany, and then moved to Switzerland, and actually to the Czech Republic itself for a short time. And then the story moved back to Germany, and ultimately it moved on to America. So we had to find a way of really showing clearly when we had moved from one country to another and from one time period to another. That was sort of the biggest challenge conceptually at the beginning. There were obviously a number of challenges with telling the story of him as a scientist and showing the work that he was developing over all this time. And there was a lot of detail went into that with the experiments and the calculations that he was working on, and a great deal of that involved blackboards, which you may or may not have heard was a very big part of the show. How we showed Einstein and other characters' work developing on the blackboards. So there were a number of parallel challenges right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. What kind of research were you able to do? Did you have a lot of materials at your disposal in regards to Einstein's home or his workplace or like that?
Well, the writers had done a great deal of research, and so the scripts were very well informed from the beginning. And that was very helpful. That was a good platform for the art department to work from. But we inevitably get into another level of detail. And we were lucky in that in Prague, there were several universities, including even the one Einstein went to himself and was a lecturer in. And there were professors and specialists there who worked with the directors and with the writers when they were there. And we had regular meetings with them. We shared the scripts with them, and they gave us their notes. And as we got into it, we discovered that a huge amount of Einstein's lecture notes, his lecture schedules, and his own work are well documented and they're kept. And we were able to find images of Einstein's formulas, the original things that he wrote, and even the blackboards that he was writing on. We had samples of his handwriting. So we were able to take the good start that the writers had made and build on that, so that what we delivered on the set, we felt pretty confident because the professors and various other experts had given that work their blessing. Mm-hmm. That we knew that the directors were working with sound material. At least we hope so. I haven't heard any bad feedback yet.
Right. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about how you distinguished these different settings and time periods in terms of color, texture, things like that.
Well, we started with the big contrast between Germany and Switzerland. And this was on two levels. One was that Switzerland, almost by its nature, is slightly more colourful than Germany, but also emotionally, Einstein was very unhappy in Germany when he was young. And when he moved to Switzerland, this was when his life picked up and he fell in love and he became happier and his work really began to pick up. And so we embraced the idea of showing all the sets that were in Switzerland were embraced colour and colour and texture to sort of reinforce this happiness that he felt there. And when he went back to Germany, we had a much more muted palette and dialed the colours right down. And in fact, we even discussed the notion that we would keep Berlin fairly drained of colour until the rise of National Socialism, so that when the swastika flag appears, it has quite a shocking impact. So that's sort of 2 or 3 general examples of the way we went with it.
And in terms of charting the progression of Einstein's life, I wonder if that affected your work at all. You know, just to reflect his. You talked about this a bit when you said that he was unhappy in Germany. I wonder if maybe that affected the arc of your work in any other ways.
Yes, I think also as he progressed through his life from his initial period in Germany through the Swiss period, he also became famous and he became wealthy. And that was very helpful because it allowed us to dial down the set dressing for his homes. I think in all we had something like 11 homes to do for him in Europe. And so I was very keen that we showed, as well as the rise in his emotional state and his happiness and his love life, and that he had a more and more comfortable life until ultimately in Berlin he had quite a large house in Berlin, or a large apartment, and I was very keen that we worked up to that, so that kind of his first place he had on his own was a tiny little studio garret, a 1-room place, everything in the room, the bed, the stove, the desk, his clothes, tiny little place. And everything looked a bit pinched and he didn't have a lot of money, so he was just eking out his existence there. But as he moved forward and he ultimately got a professorship after his 2 great theories came out, and his life progressed, then we made sure that the sets and the set dressing reflected that his professionally he was moving on, and personally he was moving on. His personal life was always in some chaos with the various women that came in and out of his life and children, and he was a bit like a bull in a china shop with all of that. And he was utterly focused on his work, totally and 100% focused on his work.
Right.
And poor old Mileva was left to keep the home and keep it nice for him. He did enjoy having a nice home and a nice life, but his focus was always on his work.
It's an incredibly well-mounted show, and I mean, I wonder what some of the challenges of doing this on a TV schedule are.
That was an enormous challenge. The number of sets, we did over 600 sets in the whole series. And we were often in one set for a very short period of time. So at times we were doing 5, 6 sets a day. And so the art department was pretty organized, I have to say. They did extremely well between the construction side of things and the set dressing side of things and the prop side of things, making all the various hand props for Einstein, all the experiments in his laboratories and so on. So it was very useful having the scripts up front, and even if we didn't have the scripts, we did have treatments, which gave us a very clear line to follow. And but once we really got going and got into the real rhythm of the show, we were working faster than I think I've ever worked on any show ever, and it was quite a challenge. But I was very pleased, by and large, with the way it looks, and you know, all the guys involved, the directors, Ken Biller, their standards were very high, so we couldn't drop our aim for very long. And the art department did extremely well, and I'm very proud of their work.
As you bring up the directors, and I was going to ask what gave you that really helped with your work.
Yes, well, of course, we had Ron Howard directing the first episode, and he was wonderful to work with, and he was very collaborative, and he pulled everybody together and wanted everybody's opinions and listened to everything. And but that was only for the pilot. Then we had other wonderful directors as well, Binky Spiro and James Hawes and Kevin Hook, and they all came along. But we were very much into the much more normal TV routine for that, a much tighter schedule. But they were all terrific to work with.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think it's important to tell this story about Albert Einstein today?
I think it has a tremendous number of resonances. I think his personal life and the story behind that will probably surprise a lot of people. How dysfunctional it was, and people at his time were not very open about discussing that kind of thing, and this shows that aspect of his life very, very clearly. I think also his work, which of course ultimately produced the atom bomb, and not for him being a pacifist, this was a very painful realization that his work would be turned to this end, rather changed the way he looked at life, and he reviewed his opinions as he went through his life. So I think also the role of women is much more clearly outlined as a modern story than it might have been some time ago, and it's very clear to show how women since that time have moved so far ahead in terms of their opportunities. But in his time, it's quite hard to look at the way women were regarded. And the story of Marie Curie is an example of that, and Mileva herself, his first wife. So I think people will enjoy looking back at that period and seeing perhaps some resonance now with how far things have moved on.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much, and congratulations on your work. It's a great show.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good one.